All right, so let's talk about gay stuff.
Let's talk about gay stuff.
Gay stuff, the podcast where we talk about gay stuff and discuss the week in LGBT history. I'm Thomas.
Tony.
Kendall.
And we're here to talk about gay stuff. All right, so this week we're talking about the week of July 14th.
I almost forgot my line on that one.
So my name is the week of July 14th through 20th. A couple interesting topics that we'll talk about. We'll talk about a scandal involving a gay congressman, Barney Frank. We'll talk about a picket that happened in San Francisco area, and then we'll talk about Queer Eye for the Straight Guy premiering back in the day. So I think some fun, interesting topics. But before we dive into our the meat of the subject, anything fun happened this week? Exciting reads, movies, watching?
My week was pretty basic, so nothing exciting, no major movies.
Can we hit on just a little bit because you're oozing out blood? So what happened?
Oh, so yes. So of course I am gay. So of course I do have to ride a scooter around town instead of driving a car.
You do wear a nice scarf when you're riding.
Well, no, I'm also a lesbian, so no fashion accessories,
Yes,
just
true.
the
Is it a
scooter.
Vespa?
Just the boots.
And it's not even a Vespa, so it's the lesbian version, the more practical
Or if
version.
you're gay, you pronounce it Vespa.
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 No. So yes, riding my scooter, had a little boo-boo where I kind of, jammed on my brakes because the car in front of me did, rolled over, so I'm a little scraped up. Major brush with death. Of course, I have to be dramatic because I'm gay, but I'm hoping I'll survive it.
You need to make that
If this is my last podcast, thank you, listeners. Love you. It's been a great run.
If
Please-
anyone wants to be his nurse, he is single and he's
Oh, yes,
accepting
yes.
male nurses to give him
He needs a male wet nurse.
a body
Yes,
sponge
wet being
bath,
the key word. Thank
sponge
you.
Bath. He is wet, but other than your bandages being wet, you seem to be okay. So which is good.
Yes.
When you told me that, I was like, oh my gosh, are you secretly dying? But you're
Yes.
walking around.
Your
Although
secret's out.
you got a small gait, but you're. But
I'm
that's just 'cause
cool.
you're gay.
I'm cool.
But a
Good.
big back gate.
Thank you.
Glad you're okay. And again,
Look at that
any,
wagon I'm dragging.
interested in male nurses, Tony is accepting phone calls. So,
Yes.
all right, glad you're okay.
A grinder pings.
Grindr.
Yes, message me on Grindr.
Nobody answers their phone
That's
anymore.
his new status. So this week also, the women's soccer team won the World Cup. How was that? Were you guys watching that?
I did not watch it.
I didn't
but
watch it, but it's so much coverage with
Yes, everybody's posting about it. Amazing.
Megan
coverage.
Rapinoe,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Congrats to the women's team.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there was a lot of controversy over there because you had outspoken soccer player talking about taking it on with Trump, which I think would have been a non-event had it not been for the president deciding to attack her pretty much on Twitter.
Is it disrespectful / unpatriotic if you're on a U.S. team to trash your own president?
No.
Okay.
Was she the first one to
It's
do
freedom
it?
of speech.
I know.
But she didn't even do it while she was playing. I mean, that comment about him, like I wouldn't go to the White House, came out apparently before the World Cup tournament even started. And so they asked her, like, would you go to the White House if you guys won? And she'd say, no, I declined it. And then the interview comes out, and then of course, that prompts a reaction from the president. I mean, this week, the president had another stellar week, but it's hard to top them all because he not only does he come after the soccer player, he goes and attacks the
UK ambassador,
yeah, the UK ambassador,
who was forced to resign.
yeah, because he said I wasn't gonna, the president said he wasn't gonna deal with him anymore. So crazy that the president. I mean, could you imagine Obama, Bush, Clinton, Bush Senior, Reagan engaging in that sort of like?
Well, can you also
behavior?
imagine, though, if a soccer player went after Obama, we wouldn't be all like, free speech, go.
No, I mean, look at the Dixie Chicks. I mean, she made one comment. Do you remember this? Like when we went into Iraq?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she was in somewhere in Europe, and right before her concert, she basically,
She's like George Bush.
yeah, she made a comment that she was not like didn't. I can't remember what she said, but it was something like her thing was she didn't support the war and didn't support America. She said not everybody's proud to be from Texas because of George Bush. That's what she said.
Or from the U.S. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean, country.
Well, the only
radio-
thing in Texas is steers and queers, and I don't see any steers in this room.
But like all of the country radio stations were throwing away their music. They wouldn't play her. I mean, they got like hate mail, and I mean, it derailed their career. I mean,
which tells
for a
you how
long
far
time.
we've come. Like the fact
Yeah.
that and that was in 2003, 2004 when that
Ish, yeah.
happened, and now here we are in 2019, and everyone's like, oh, she's getting endorsements, from major deal endorsements. Which Ben Shapiro, the conservative commentator, like he was getting some backlash because she said the only reason she's getting so much attention and all these deals is because she's an outspoken lesbian. Which I think there's some truth to that. But even still, the fact that you would be an outspoken lesbian, and that would afford you more. I mean, just think about Colin Kaepernick. I mean, not until Nike did the ad last year was he getting any. I mean, he's been shunned. He's never going to play in the NFL again, and so now you have this woman who's getting a lot of praise for being outspoken. But to your point, Kendall, I mean, she, if this were during Obama's administration, yeah, there would be a different reaction. The media would be like, how dare you, which I'm kind of growing. I wouldn't say the fake news piece, but the media is like very slanted towards Trump. Rightly so. I mean, they're calling him out on all this stuff, but it's like, it's almost an obsession of like, let's see what we can find. And it just gets, it's exhausting.
It sells.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he does it to
commercials
himself though, because I mean,
Totally agree.
Like he
He's the
loves
puppet master.
controversy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exhausting, and I hear the media folks, talking all the time, saying, "Well, we have to cover this because if we let it slide, then we normalize it." But it's like at some point,
No.
Well, I mean,
that's their excuse, but
they do it because of money.
it's always money first.
Well,
Always,
I
always
think,
money first.
I honestly, my personal opinion is that's one of the reasons.
The reasons.
Okay, so I honestly think that's one of the reasons why Trump was elected, because I think the media during the entire election season last season was all about the ratings. And if you look at all of the Republican debates, there weren't a lot of questions on issues or important topics. It was like, oh, Marco Rubio said you have small hands. How do you respond to that? Or Chris Christie said this about you. And so I think they really wanted like dirt and spitfire. And I think like they just
sound bites.
they wanted the ratings. And so they were like, let's not go after issues. Let's go after these things, which are going to get viewers involved.
But Trump did that too. I mean, it was
Right. I think it was
sick,
the
like,
media wanted
partnership.
it. He
Like,
perpetuated it.
they're
It
both
just
complicit in it,
I agree.
and he continues to. I mean, when he was campaigning, I mean, he gave all these news outlets like free content, right? I mean, he just would call them up.
Yeah.
And say, hey, let's talk. So on all the stations, Morning Joe, CNN, I mean, he would call Don Lemon, which now...
I had a coworker that isn't political. She doesn't really probably vote in every election. And she said, even in the primary, she goes, I'm voting for Trump. She goes, I like reality TV. And if he's elected, every day on the news, it's going to be like reality TV. So I'm voting for him.
And it is. And like you said, this week, I mean, or in the last few weeks, he picked on a soccer player. And I don't even think... So had this been during Obama's administration and a player was calling out Obama, I don't think the news media would have probably covered it. But the difference is Obama wouldn't have chimed in. He wouldn't have commented on that. And his press secretaries would have said, that's not something we're getting involved in, right? We're supporting the U.S. team, and that's that. That would have been the line out of the Obama
Well, even I
administration.
think when the Dixie Chicks said that about George Bush,
He didn't get involved in it.
he just said, I mean, he didn't say anything. He just thought, let the world take care of itself.
You're the
And-
president of the freaking United States. You don't need to chime in on that stuff, but that's what he does. And
Yep.
so I think that's what makes this different. So what should have been a good celebration has now become this whole partisan event where people are not fully embracing the victory that
Which is
occurred.
sad because, I mean, historically, soccer hasn't been that huge in the U.S. It's just the last several years that it's kind of gaining momentum. And, like, our women's team is amazing.
Yep.
And so it's kind of sad that it's, like, that's taking the spotlight away.
The interesting thing with the women's team, and I don't know if because at the time the tournament started that it was revealed what was said about the president or them not wanting to go to the White House, but there seemed to be a lot of backlash, and maybe it was non-U.S. stuff about the sportsmanship of the soccer team because they they played Thailand in like the first round, and like they routed them by double-digit victory, which folks were saying, well, that's unsportsmanlike. And I don't think that was an issue, but I did see some behavior that folks were saying, well, you'd never say that to a guy, and I guess it's just my personal bias and having played sports in the past. I don't like when you spike the football. Just score the touchdown, or in this case in soccer, score the goal, and then get on with it. It's good to celebrate with your teammates, but to be excessive and flamboyant about it, that's never been my personal style. So I get some of the feedback on that, but. I mean, I don't think, and to me, that's not a commentary on men versus women. That's just a sportsman-like thing to begin with. But
I think the best thing you could do is say all the things you want to about Trump, First Amendment, interviews and all that, and then still go to the White House, because it's
the office.
It's the office, and it's the White House. And then leave and continue on about your business.
Yeah.
But I don't know about all these people boycotting going to the White House just because Trump is there. I mean, what are you really accomplishing?
I don't know. See, my thing is, I would look at her perspective as, I'm not going to legitimize his presidency. Like, personally. I mean, I know he is president, but...
And he was elected
by saying, like...
duly. I mean, Russian interference aside, I mean, the Russians didn't hack the voting system, right? Yeah, they influenced folks from and they influenced folks from social media and that sort. But it wasn't like they hacked. I mean, people voted for Trump. I mean, and you see it in the polls today. People like Trump, right? I mean,
right.
I don't, but there's still 35 to 40% of Americans that are like,
40-some, yeah.
We like what he's doing. So all the bots did, all the Russians did was just bring to light that sentiment that was hidden during the Obama administration. Was there because all the racist tones and the backlash against Obama, but I think this gave him a voice, because in the past they were repressed or pushed back, and now Trump embraces what they say, right? And so I don't know. What I don't like about this whole thing, though, is the president, and it's all on the president because he responded. Like, he politicized this event. So the soccer, when they had the celebration the other day in New York, the soccer team, there was a lot of, well, at least the news clips that are coming out are more political commentary, like, oh, we've got to stand up and we've got to fight. Normally, you don't hear sports teams talking about that. I get that they're women, but this isn't their first World Cup winning either. Yeah, so it's definitely, and I saw one thing, and I think it was from Ben Shapiro. Like, you saw the soccer team more embraced on CNN and MSNBC than you did on ESPN, right? So if we were truly embracing their sports, then we would have seen all the highlights on ESPN. Instead, we're seeing Don Lemon, Anderson Cooper, Rachel Maddow interviewing the soccer team, talking about politics and their invitation to the White House. I mean, this situation, in my opinion, is squarely on, like, the reason it's as tainted as it is, it's squarely on the president. But that's where we are. So kudos to everyone who voted for President Trump.
Well,
what is different in 2020.
What does show progress is that they're not talking about. I mean, there are several lesbians that have been outspoken. Megan Rapinoe being the biggest one, but we're not talking about their sexuality. Which, remember Billie Jean King, when she was, all these lesbian athletes, when they came out or were forced out, it was like, am I even going to have a career after this? That's not the issue. I feel like if these women were straight, it would just be still about the political message they're saying. Well,
that's what the conservatives are saying, though, that they have a louder megaphone because they are, in their words, angry lesbians. But I don't know. Like I said, it's become a situation that should be celebrated to a situation that's become politicized, and again, that's squarely on President DJT. So hopefully things will change down the road, but I doubt it. So unless something drastic happens in 2020, what'll happen though? It'll freaking be Florida again. But speaking of, you just went to Florida, Kendall, on vacation.
Florida, just got back from Miami and Key West.
You look all tan.
No, barely. I'm like little pink. Like,
I was joking.
Laffy Taffy pink.
That's just sunburn.
I know, and I was barely in the sun. I burned very easily, obviously. But yeah, it was fun. It's the low season, so there weren't that many people out. But
you're like, thank God.
Yeah, it let me shine even more.
Any fun stories?
No.
Oh, come on.
Your friend didn't get crazy.
They weren't fun.
Yeah, there were crazy stories, but not
Not
you
for the
know, not for
podcast.
now.
Not for now.
On the 1-year anniversary.
At the end of the podcast, when he has a few drinks.
That's the after-hour show.
Yeah.
Tune in. No.
Ooh, the late night.
Yeah,
Late night podcast.
You know how like on some of those shows, like
LTAX After Dark.
the Walking Dead, it's like they have those.
Sounds like
they-
the Cinemax.
they have the-
soft porn.
RuPaul used to have the Illusions Lounge or whatever after the Untucked. Yeah,
Ooh.
that's we could save it for that.
Untucked.
All right, so yeah, so let's. It sounds like we had a fun week. Plenty of controversy going on. So let's get into talking about gay stuff. Before we do that, hey, did you know the unemployment rate is at 3.7% in the U.S.? If you are trying to hire someone, then you probably already know that because you are having trouble finding quality candidates. Economy Works is here to help. Don't have time, energy, or the resources to hire? Economy Works is ready to help you write job descriptions, find candidates, review resumes, and phone screen candidates. Let the Economy Works talent help you do more with less. Economy Works. When we work, the economy works. Find out more at economyworks.com. All right. So over to me, I guess. We're going to talk about the premiere of... Well, before I get into that, so we're going back to 2003. What was happening in 2003? Remember? Can you guys... You blocked it out of your...
Yeah, wasn't that when we invaded Iraq?
We invaded Iraq. Yes. Yeah. Any fun...
Britney Spears came out with an album, I believe.
Well, actually, she didn't. I was researching that. I was like, oh yeah, Britney was, but
It
actually,
was
Britney,
2002.
She was washed
2002,
up by
and
then.
then she came out. Oh, she did come out one in 2003. You're right. It was later in the year. Beyonce came out with her first solo album. Christina had an album. Alicia Keys was popular. So that's on the music front. On the TV front, you remember the big shows that were going on?
Friends.
I didn't watch
Friends was
TV,
up there.
remember?
You still didn't have
I
TV
had it, but by
at,
that
like,
time I was
24?
used to not watching
You didn't know how
it.
to turn it on
Yeah.
because you weren't used to it.
reality TV was big. You had
Oh, yeah.
things
Real,
like
what was the MTV show? Real House?
well,
Real House? Oh my god.
What was it called?
Real
Real
World.
Real World, yeah.
yeah, that was around, but there were other shows. Like
They
it
lived in
started
a real
becoming
house.
popular on like network TV. So you had things like
Survivor.
Survivor.
Apprentice.
No, Apprentice wasn't out yet, but
We're
yeah,
not allowed to
um,
use that word.
American Idol, Big Brother, all those sorts of things, Extreme Makeover. So we were starting to get flooded with all these reality TV shows. On the LGBT front, what was going on?
Queer Eye for the Straight Guy.
Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, but the context of being like, yes, all these things were happening, but from an LGBT milestone, like we were still faced with Don't Ask, Don't Tell. We still couldn't get married. Lawrence v. Texas had just been
yeah.
overturned, so we were finally allowed to legally have gay sex, and so all that was happening, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this show appears in 2003, in July 15, 2003. Queer Eye for the Straight Guy premieres on Bravo TV. So Bravo TV was, historically known for some boring programming. There was the one that Will Ferrell used to make fun of on SNL. What was it? The
Actor studio? Inside the actor studio.
Inside of the actor studio. Like
That was
their,
good though.
that was their big show that they were known for. And then Bravo TV drops this show on July 15th. It was one of two LGBT-oriented shows that they would be releasing in July of 2003. The other one being Boy Meets Boy. So just an aside on Boy Meets Boy, the premise of that show, which didn't last long.
What was it about?
Yeah, so it was kind of like take The Bachelor and take. There was another show, a straight show, $1 Million Man or something like that. And so it's taking these two concepts and it's basically saying you have a gay man, who has to select from a pool of suitors of someone he wants to date. The challenge with this pool of suitors, it's mixed with gay and straight guys. And so,
Yummy.
really, while
I know one way to find out.
in one instance, while the prevailing premise is like, oh, is he going to find love? There's a secret kind of plot behind that to saying, yeah, but can the straight guy trick the gay guy to thinking, he loves them? And think about how twisted that is, right? So it's like, in The Bachelor, you have someone who selects their mate, and either they work out or they don't. But if they do work out, at least there's always one prospect, right?
Yep.
In this Boy Meets Boy world, it's like if you select the straight guy, it's like, haha, well, too bad.
Yeah.
Thought you were in love, but no. So it was pretty twisted. But Queer Eye was not like that.
I'd be willing to gamble. if
Roll
I were
the
on that
dice.
show in 2003.
Queer Eye,
Like, ugh.
Queer Eye was very different, though. I mean, it was a huge milestone for the LGBT community because it was one of a few shows that featured. It was one of a few shows that featured a lead LGBT characters at the time. So think about what was out on air. It was basically Will and Grace. I mean, you had a couple of LGBT characters and shows like Queer Eye, not Queer Eye, but Queer as Folk and other
Ellen
series.
had come out. Yeah,
Ellen
a
had
few
come
years
out, but
later.
she was off the air, right? And so there wasn't a lot of LGBT characters, and even with Will and Grace, Eric McCormick, who played Will, he's not gay, and Sean Hayes, who played Jack, was not out, and so you really had no gay characters that were played by gay people, and so this new show. Was very kind of in your face because it not only was featuring gay characters, and these guys weren't characters; they were real people, right? This was a reality show, but it also had that in your face title, "Queer Eye for the Straight Guy." So I think there was some.
Well, tell the people that haven't seen it what it's about.
Yeah. So, but I think when folks were taking that on, they were like, well, what is this going to entail? Like, is this the gay conversion that we've been thinking about? But what it was a it was deemed as a makeover show, but really what they tried to slant it as is it was a make better show. Basically, you had 5 gay guys who would help a straight guy, a poor straight guy, with things like grooming, keeping his house clean, how to dine,
fashion,
and all sorts of things to help him.
How to be a better bottom.
How to be a better bottom. How to help him dance. How to be more culturally aware of things. So it was a complete departure from the other shows because a lot of the shows that were out there were competition shows, right? So this one was like, or they were makeover shows saying you have this.
But you know what it also did, which I'm okay with. It perpetuated stereotypes.
Well, let me get there. but yeah, I mean, it was a show that was a kind of, like I said, not a makeover show, but a make better show. But it was well received early on. The reviews were that it was the first feel good primetime reality series that was out there. There were no hurt feelings, which a lot of those Big Brother types, or American Idol, someone's going home feeling defeated. Everybody has a lot of laughs, and the victim, this hapless straight guy, walks away with a few handy pointers, as does the audience in terms of how to groom better.
Handies?
Yes, a few handies. Further, the straight guy in question wasn't so much made over, but he was refocused in terms
or
of
kind of like enhanced.
Yeah. And so that was an appealing thing. And again, I talk about all the things that were going on in 2003 because it wasn't. I mean, this is post 9/11 too, so we're still feeling the effects of that heading into war. So you were looking for something that was going to be a bit more refreshing, right, or something more lighthearted or more feel good. Again, it was noted by the critics that that again being well received, that they're really trying to make the straight guy better, not over. And the straight guy, the differentiator here is he's not only willing to be molded, but he's also grateful for the advice. So it's not like they're giving him, because you'd see some shows where you've got the judges or the help, the Queer Eyes in this case helping, but the recipient wasn't very receptive of the help they were getting. So this was a way to that again you had a grateful recipient. Of course, the audience enjoyed it because it was matter of fact, and they enjoyed the Fab Five, which was a term that became synonymous with the 5 hosts that led the show, and they really appreciated the naturalness and the fun that the hosts conveyed. One of the things that Carson Kressley, who's one of the hosts, he noted, he's like, the difference for us is we weren't playing to a type. We were just being who we are. We were being authentic self. So again, comparing that to like a Will and Grace, to like, yes, they had gay characters, but those guys were playing characters, right? These guys, although stereotypical, that we're gays are focused on fashion and design and etiquette. He's like, we weren't playing a part. That's just who we were. And so that was kind of one of the things that, again, was appealing to the audience. So a little bit about the Fab Five, right? You guys know Carson Kressley, yeah? I mean, you guys know all these guys? Carson, of course, was the fashion expert. He's since then is I think probably most known, at least to the younger gays, as the guy on RuPaul's Drag Race. So he's a guest judge on there. And then you had Ted Allen, who was a food and wine connoisseur, really kind of focused on etiquette. He's been around for a while on hosting a number of events, number of series rather, like Chopped, the next Food Network star, Iron Chef. You had Kyan Douglas, who was focused on grooming. That guy you didn't see as much. He kind of took some time off, but now you can see him on Rachel Ray show. Tom Felicia, who was a guy you like, Kendall, because of his
I love his interior design style.
Yeah. So he was good. And then you had Jay Rodriguez, who also is around. He was more focused on pop culture and relationships, and he's had several acting gigs since then. The show, again, was popular at the time from 2003, ran until 2007, earned an Emmy Award for an outstanding reality program during its run. And, at one point during its peak, had about 3 million viewers on there. So, again, quite popular. Of course, every show has its critics. So this one, some of the critiques were, as you were noting, Kendall, playing to the stereotypes, right? It perpetuated some of the things that people just assumed gay people consumed.
I think the big impact it had is that straight guys were asking gay people to come into their home and saying, okay, I want your advice, I'm coming to you to help me, which even at that time, straight guys did not want anything to do with the gays. And I think that's even because around 2003, that's the whole metrosexual term came about.
Yep.
And I think Queer Eye had a big impact on
I agree.
men plucking their eyebrows and doing their hair and
Well,
wearing
that was going to be my
awful dragon shirts.
That was going to be
sequin.
my big critique of the show is that it brought forward in our face the term metrosexual, which I never.
Even though
liked.
metrosexuals were always there, they just we called them
I think
preppy or.
From my perspective, what I remember about this show, because I didn't really watch it, I don't watch a lot of TV, but I was living in Louisiana, working offshore, so in the oil industry, and so that was kind of like everybody that I hung out with, and it was one of the first shows where, pretty much it was popular, so a lot of people watched it, and women would bring it up and think, oh my God, this is a great show, it's legit, and the guys would be the first to point out the negative, it's so stereotypical, but women would kind of legitimize it, to their husbands or in general conversation, but I just remember that it being very popular and women would be very excited about it, probably because they thought, God, I wish my husband was more, a little bit like this or could use this show or whatever. And I think a lot of straight men, and maybe it was their, probably their historical anti-gay mentality, but then also I don't want to be held to that pedestal or whatever, but they would kind of be anti the show, but it would be, and it wasn't even a heated discussion. It was just at a group dinner, they could talk about it, and it's oh my God, I love that show. And it's bunch of gays, blah, 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 so stereotypical, but it was kind of brought to the forefront and you could legitimately talk about it. And it wasn't I think even the guys that were maybe critical of it were, it's a legitimate show, it's just not my thing or whatever.
Right.
The gay guys?
The straight guys.
Well, even there were gay guys that were I'm not one of those fat five.
Yeah, I could see that too.
There was kind of a backlash of, I'm not one of those people.
Because they were very flamboyant and, very put together.
And they picked stereotype
of course,
careers.
Yeah.
Overall, it had, to me, a positive impact, but I do remember at the time gays becoming kind of trendy to where girls wanted gay friends, and even Cosmo did a article about how the number one, I forget what year it was, I think it was around 2007.
Accessory.
Number one accessory is a gay best friend.
Right, and that
which there was backlash.
That was
before
another,
Paris brought the Chihuahua.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That was another critique of the show. It's it just kind of brought that to the forefront of the gay accessory, right? Because now you could bring the gay guy around and he would help you plan for your party, of what meals to prepare, or help you dress your husband or your boyfriend or whatever. And it perpetuated those stereotypes. It kind of brought, while it was bringing gay people into mainstream society, it was you're an accessory. You're not the main character.
You're like a useful sidekick.
Right.
To better me.
Right. The other thing that was, they noted it was all cisgender So not in all, basically all but one, all white males, right? So not a lot of diversity in terms of the Fab Five. And like I said, my big beef was the metrosexual piece. Like that, I couldn't get over that.
I forgot about that, but that was kind of the kickoff of the metrosexual, and that was a big deal for a lot of years. So that guys wanting to be very metro.
But I feel like that was like the bi thing, right? It's just a gateway to you all go in. It's just like, but it helped me because I wasn't.
No, but I think a lot of guys wanted to be like that guy that like 100% straight, never had any interest in men, but like they wanted to be that guy that was like, oh my god, look at that suit.
They wanted to feel pretty.
All men want to feel
noticed.
Attractive, and
yeah,
was
the
their
kind of
way
head
to do it,
turning
yeah.
noticed.
Yeah, but I don't know. Like, there's something like the metrosexual was like too clean. Like you said, the eyebrows like plucked, and the super smooth skin. It's like I like a little wear and tear on some.
Those bootcut jeans with the what is it, sequin on the butt?
Yeah, right. But I don't know. Like
Bedazzled butts.
I did think it was interesting because it like having not being out. Like in dating women at the time and enjoying it, like there was something that was like stirring something weird feeling, like some confusion in me because I'm like, wait, am I just because I didn't want to dress like I wasn't a metrosexual, so to speak. That wasn't my fashion sense, but it was
You just
like,
had the eyebrows.
Yeah, yes, but it was like, do I want to like? Is that all I am? Like, am I not? I'm not gay.
Am I just a
like,
piece of meat to you women?
No, but no. I'm saying was I just kind of on the metrosexual scale and not really gay?
Oh, it made you wonder if you were.
Yeah, like it was a little bit not the queer eye, but the metrosexual piece. Like I said, it started to shake me out of like, am I? Well, I don't know. Like I said, it was very confusing. It was like, am I? Because I was, while I had dabbled, I was like, well, it's just I'm still straight, and then I'm like, well, am I metro? Like, am I straight metro type? But I don't know. It was, like I said, it was a confusing time being a 24-year-old guy fresh out of college. So.
There's always the pendulum swing, though, because remember not too long, well, a few years ago, it was all about dad bods. And I think that was a reaction to...
Wait, I missed that trend?
Dad bods? Oh, yeah.
Oh, wait.
That's exactly what
Dad bods in 2019 is something different. The guy from what's that underwater... Aquaman. He just came out with there was on Twitter, there was all...
And they're shaming him for having a dad bod?
Yeah, but he doesn't have a dad bod. Like, he has what most guys our age would be like, yeah, I'm cut. Like, he's still very cut. It's just not...
Oh, and they're like,
rippling.
It's a dad bod?
Yeah.
He got rid of his beard, which really made him look chunky.
He's not chunky.
Right, I'm saying visually because he doesn't have that facial hair.
He's still sculpted. Yeah, it was crazy.
Oh, I was going to shave mine, should I not? Will I look even fatter?
Well, do you want to embrace your dad bod?
Well, I've been embracing
and have the
it.
internet
Nobody
talk
else.
about you?
Well, now he's got scars to prove. He's got bandages and that he's hiding.
Yes.
But
I'm going for the rugged look.
yeah, really rugged. So
did you have an extreme makeover and you said you had a Vespa accident?
Right, my extreme makeover was on my legs.
Yeah, that's not. If you're trying to shave
Elbow,
off
yeah.
fat from your body, that's not how to do it. You don't.
Like,
you don't
yeah.
You
burn
start
it
from the
off.
ground up.
You don't.
I need my softball legs.
Like, you don't burn it off by scraping your
Well, he's got to
Vespa.
pay off the legs and then he can work up
I would have my
above the
guts.
waist.
Like, that's next time.
Yeah.
So Queer Eye, though, you think about it today. I think it was as you were saying, Kendall. Overall, I think people view it as despite some criticism, it was a popular show in its time, and I think it was a sign of progress because you saw in the show that there was friendships that could be made between straight and queer men, which is a bond that wasn't okay to be formed previously, right? I mean, you couldn't, if you did that, then if you're a straight man hanging out with gay men, then you were gay, right? Which is not the case. And so this just made it feel normal that you could not only go to gay men and get some help and some advice on some stereotypical things, but you could also be friends and form a bond on that. So, basically saying queer men and straight men could coexist, they could laugh and work together without any sexual strings attached, despite the gay man's best.
It was a good show.
Yeah.
I do feel like the clothes they put them in were like, ooh, gay. Boo boo, you gay. You ain't metrosexual, boo boo.
You just gay.
It was like, that's when those really colorful shirts came in, which a lot of straight
Oh
guys were wearing.
yes.
And the cuff was
the
always
colorful
up.
button down. Yeah,
And it was like these big lapels.
yeah, exactly.
I still-
It was almost like kind of a throwback to the 70s,
I still have that shirt. No, I'm
yeah.
kidding.
like with the stripes and the colors,
The
and,
floral
yeah.
on the inside. And
Yeah.
Of course, as we know, Queer Eye has seen a reboot, although with a different Fab Five. So it was rebooted in 2018 on Netflix, doing really well.
Season 4 comes out July 19th.
I was gonna say they've got a very positive review on Rotten Tomato, 91% rating, and they've been renewed for 2 more seasons. So
I like it. It's completely different. They're more like, it's less a focus of outward stuff than, and they're doing women too. Well, first of all, let me digress. Do y'all remember the female version where it was 5 lesbians
No.
making over women?
What?
It lasted, I don't even think, 1 season.
Oh, I can imagine.
But I mean, what would they
Who's
do?
interested
Come in
that?
and
Yeah.
build a deck for you?
Or like put on
I
some
mean, what
cargo,
5 lesbians? If we're gonna have stereotype,
or put on cargo shorts and a sports jersey. I mean,
let's join a softball team.
teach you how to barbecue, right? How to play softball. I mean, we love our
You
lesbians,
gotta
but
speak to your audience. Gloria's listening.
yes, Gloria, we love you.
Well, she's taking notes. Hi, Gloria.
Oh, Gloria could run the fuck out of that show. She could. Yeah.
There's a spinoff. We'll do a spinoff.
Gloria's Girls.
Let's talk about lesbian stuff. Coming to a podcast near you. Yeah, so you're right. The show, I think, is well received because it's not. Yes, it's a reboot, but it's not entirely a reset on the old show. It's new. It's a different
It's good.
perspective. New host. Instead of just being solely based on in New York like the last show was, although they had a couple of trips outside of New York. This one they're on the road, right? They're in
yeah,
in
the
red
first
states.
season was Atlanta, and
Oh,
then
okay.
it was Kansas City.
And to your point, Kendall, like it's not just about like let's help you be better, but they're also kind of in the subtext of the stories they're telling, talking about kind of real relevant issues that are impacting all of our lives. Now, I think there's some criticism, like they're trying to squeeze too much in it, but they're saying, hey, look, it's still resonating with the audience. They're bringing in issues like Black Lives Matter, gay people coming out to their families, so some hard hitting like storylines that again transcend just let's make you over or make you better. Let's help you be a better person.
Well, and one thing that they're kind of forward on, because in 2003, no one was using words like cisgendered, non-binary,
Mhm.
and all the terms that even I don't know. But one of them, Jonathan Van Ness, who is hilarious, said, "Is it non-binary? You might not even know." He came out recently as I don't identify as man, woman. I just live my life. You know, he has long hair, a beard, and pretty much always wears a dress, and he's not trying to be transgender. So that's a whole new conversation that even in 2019 they're bringing that wasn't there in 2003.
Yeah. I mean, so just a final thought on the show, the original. You know, it did change, and again, going back to a quote from Carson Kressley, he's saying, growing up, people would say, "Oh my God, there's that queer guy." He said, but after the release of Queer Eye, when he would return home, he'd hear people shouting, "Oh my God, you're that queer guy!" And so
Kill him!
The tone was very celebratory versus it being
Okay.
as when he was growing up, where people were like, "There's that queer." So it's come a long way. I watched a few episodes of the early. I mean, it's interesting that
I think it's all still on Netflix.
Yeah, when I started doing the research for this, or when I got assigned this topic, I was like, "What am I? I don't remember the show. I haven't watched the reboot." But
Oh, I love it.
as
Did
I
you
was-
watch it back in the day?
I watched a few episodes, but again, I wasn't gay, so I was
And
like,
you
no
didn't need
homo.
the help because you were
So-
like Metro.
But like as
Already.
is what happens
out
to
as
me
Metro.
often, the significant other starts watching the show, and then I'm like, well, I'm sitting here watching this show. So that's kind of what
like,
happened
that's
there.
what I want to be when I grow up.
No, I didn't. But I remember watching it, thinking it was an interesting show. But I'm not a big reality TV show person in general. But I will say, as I was doing the research on this show, I was reminded of some of the episodes. But I do feel like it was it played a major milestone in terms
Yeah, I
of the
think so.
LGBT acceptance.
Or brought people into their home, gays into their home.
Yeah, and so I was like, wow, this is.
Yeah. And I
really-
feel like the conversations I was talking about where it could be like an open dinner table discussion with a group of people kind of legitimized or, just made it more of an open conversation.
Anytime you're more visible
Yeah.
in like a groundbreaking thing. Like Ellen coming out, she lost her show and lost a bunch of sponsors and was out of work for years. But it sowed the seeds for her to become this pioneer that's now more appreciated and has like the #1 talk show.
Yeah. And
Queer
so the
Eye-
seeds for other people.
Yeah.
Well, that's my somewhat. You look at today's political landscape, and you've got someone like an AOC, or in 2016 Bernie Sanders, people that are out there. Like for them to just dog what moderates. I mean, I get you need to, and we talked about this before. You need to be aspirational, but I feel, because I'm more of a pragmatist. Like I feel like. We need to recognize we're not going to get there. I mean, if people would have been complaining in 2003, like there's not enough, transgendered people in the show. Like that's a legitimate claim, but I'm like, there's no gay people being talked about. So, do we become okay with like having just a little bit of progress, or do we have to be all in all the time? Like to me, that's where there's some tension there on the left that I think could get us in trouble in 2020.
But moderates aren't even what progress are a lot of times they advocating for, because sometimes the moderate view is taking the conservative view. The moderate view comes about because liberals are forcing a conservative viewpoint to drag into the current year, if that makes any sense. So it kind of, if you're advocating, arguing for what some consider an extreme position, what it's going to land on a lot of times is a moderate position, and it becomes the moderate view. But a lot of times the so-called centrist and moderates side with the conservatives.
Well,
So the definition of moderate changes because of liberals saying, no, we demand this. The whole public option on healthcare is now a moderate view of Medicare for all. But that was never a moderate view before, if that makes sense. They were forced to kind of find a compromise.
So I guess kind of getting back to Thomas's original point, a good example is the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance a few years ago. And so for viewers that don't know, 4, 5, 6 years ago, Houston was voting on this Equal Rights Ordinance, and because basically it's still okay to get fired for being gay, get thrown out of your, landlord's house for being gay, whatever. And so Houston wanted to have a citywide ordinance of, equal rights for LGBT people. And there was a big issue of, should we include transgenders? And Anise Parker was mayor at the time. And originally they thought, if we do not include transgenders in the bill, much higher likelihood this will pass. But the transgender community was like, are you kidding me? We have a lesbian mayor. This needs to be in the bill. And so they did end up including, and then it became labeled the bathroom bill, where all these male predators are going to be in the female bathroom. And so, for right or wrong, I think it's right to include everybody, but then it's like the bill didn't pass. Whereas if it hadn't included them, it would have, but then it's like, well, what progress did you make then? You made half progress, but so there's always a struggle.
Well, that was one of the things that we kind of noted in one of our kind of daily day in LGBT history, right? So that in this past week, Ann Arbor, Michigan back in 1972 was the first city to pass an ordinance that protected gay and bisexual rights. They wanted to put transgender rights in there, but they weren't going to be able to pass it, so they pulled the transgender protections out, which was unfortunate. Again, I don't know. Like because I'm trying to argue it in a different way. I can't relate to the transgender thing, the transgender aspect, and I don't mean to say transgender thing because that was not right. But I can't relate to being transgender. But I try to put it in the context of like if there was a racial law that was passed that excluded Hispanics, would I feel differently? Yes, I guess so. So I see the point. I don't know.
And my thing is, I'm not transgender, and here's why I think go broke or go home, like go for it, because if you have a law that it's like, okay, we can either include or not include transgender, if we don't, it's much higher likely to pass. If you have a law that doesn't include them and it passes, they're all on their own to fight Whereas
Right.
if it's like it didn't pass and all of us are left in the lurch, we're all going to continue fighting. Whereas, because I mean, and we'll get to this in our next topic a little bit, but there's a big portion of the gay community that they don't like transgender people, or they're not going to fight for transgender people. And so, and even if you would, if you're taken care of, what's your incentive to?
Well, there's a big chunk of the LGBT community that don't like drag queens or effeminate men or bottoms, or I mean, there's a lot of
There's a lot of stigma still.
yeah.
I guess maybe that's a difference in mindset, right? Because to me, I'm always like, having worked in the corporate world, it's like you can't if you try to solve for 100%, you're never going to get anything done, right?
Right.
And so I take that mentality, saying, okay, look, I need to make incremental steps. Like in my mindset, it's not like, hey, we're going to forget about we got this pass, we're going to forget everyone else. It's like we've got a roadmap of what we're trying to do. So let's get what we can accomplish today, and then quickly start working on phase 2. But I get that's not everyone's feeling, because most folks are like, hey, look, I'm good, so I don't need to worry about everyone else. So I can appreciate that. Like I said, my mindset is, and this is why these conversations are good for me, because it does say that not everyone thinks like me. So when I become irritated by an AOC taking extremist views, saying and beating up fellow Dems for not being stronger position, you're right. If we don't try to go all in now, then maybe we missed the boat, which is kind of what we're did with healthcare.
Well, to me, the best example is Bernie Sanders in 2016. Was if you listen to the pundits or the so-called establishment, there's no way he ever would have had a chance. Nobody would ever vote for him unless they were fringe radicals. He nearly got the nomination as identifying as a Democrat socialist.
I have to wonder if he wasn't the nominee, if his lack of baggage and these Rust Belt blue collar workers that are like, the system has screwed me over, let's take a chance on Trump, would have been like, you know what, Trump's crazy and economically Bernie's for me, if he wouldn't have tipped the scales in some of those states and won.
Well, Hillary is the classic centrist argument of, you got to take it slow. We can't, hey, you're acting crazy, Bernie. She said it about Barack Obama, too. But fast forward to now, 3 years later, and he seems like a moderate because he brought the party to his
That's
views.
the thing. They move. So like AOC, she's moving people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas if you listen to a lot of people that say, no, we have to do it incrementally, they're so timid about change and so instinct of saying, no, it's not going to work, that there's no guts to do anything, and it takes, to me, far longer than it should. What Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that's AOC if you're not familiar with it, what she's doing is saying, okay, guys, basically, okay, old people, you've been here for how many decades, and you've been talking about it for how long? What's your plan? How are we going to get there? Let's stop, okay? And stop talking about half-ass 20% measures when the problem is far bigger than what you're proposing. What are we going to do, this little bill, call it an accomplishment, and address it in 30 years, which is a lot of times what happens. So the conversation is now being led, to me it was obvious in 2016, the Democratic Party is becoming what used to be liberal is now considered moderate. And that's kind of what I was saying earlier, to where it takes liberal people to drag people, to create the moderate position, because centrism, to me, kind of lags behind where a lot of times the popular sentiment is and what people are willing to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's well, this is all conversation birthed from Queer Eye from the Straight Guy.
I mean, every time I talk about Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, I just happen to talk about Bernie Sanders and
All you ever talk about is
AOC.
politics.
Well, y'all know about my Bernie crush.
Yeah, we don't need.
That's X-rated.
He's always
and
on my
our
mind.
podcast listeners said keep it classy.
We don't need
with
details
Bernie
on
from now
Bernie.
on. Yes.
If he gets
Really?
elected, no.
Okay.
All right, so
I'm sure
so
they're thinking that.
that's Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, a milestone reality show that has seen its revival now in 2018 and continuing into 2020, and we'll see how far it goes. But a great show that I think brought gays started bringing gays and lesbians and to the forefront of mainstream culture. So, that said, let's switch gears. Tony.
Yes. Okay. So actually, the end of that conversation before we got political kind of leads pretty well into our next topic. So, there was a picket that took place in the '60s in San Francisco, and it isn't very well known, and it was actually not deemed very successful at the time that it took place, but it really planted the seed for future events in San Francisco that kind of were, in my mind, gave momentum to the whole LGBT rights movement, which led to Stonewall 3 years later. But and it was actually led by drag queens and transgender people. So it was San Francisco in 1966, and to kind of set the stage, San Francisco is a very gay city, and the reason there are so many gay people there is after World War II, the military was very strict about discharging homosexuals, and they would discharge them to San Francisco, especially the Navy. They would just leave them there. And a lot of these people, after being dishonorably discharged from the military, couldn't really go home, so they stayed there.
I mean, you could be discharged in worse places, right? I mean, like,
yes.
Like if you're going to be discharged in some place in the U.S., San Francisco, beautiful scenery, great weather. I mean, I know folks because it can be cooler climate and misty a lot of the time. But I don't know. I think that's a beautiful part of the country.
Yeah. So I mean, not that it was bad, but that's kind of why there's historically, a lot of gay people there. So, in the '60s in America, it's not really easy to be gay, right? You can lose your family, you can lose your jobs, can get kicked out of your house, and so the Tenderloin area was kind of the gay district. And the reason the gays were kind of congregated there is, similar to other cities, police were very, brutal to the gay community. And they kind of had this, if it happens in Tenderloin, we won't be as bad because as long as it's kept to one area. And then also, if all the gays were there, it made it easy on the cops to be like, I need some money, I'll just go raid that one area, take in a bunch of change, whatever. So anyways, it was a pretty rough area. And in San Francisco in particular, the gays were not accepting of transgender people or drag queens at all. Like, they were not allowed in the gay bars. And so, and living in America in the 60s, like people that were openly cross-dressers or transgender could not get jobs. And so a lot of them were forced into prostitution. And they, did it in the Tenderloin area. And at that time, it was illegal to be a cross-dresser. So if a cop saw you walking down the street, they could arrest you. I mean, they could threaten to arrest you and demand money. They could demand sex. They could do whatever. These prostitutes, some cross-dressers or transgender people, if they had a lot of singing or dancing talent, could get a job doing that. But again, they had to wear male clothes to and from the venue. They could only change there, and because in public they couldn't be seen in it. A lot of their customers, these prostitutes, they could rape them, murder them. They could cut off their genitalia, and nothing would ever happen to them because the police didn't care. So
that's so crazy.
A pretty rough life. And one of their places of respite where they could go was there was a cafe called Compton's Cafeteria. It was everybody in the Tenderloin went there, 24 hours, cheap food. So the drag queen and transgender prostitutes would go there at 2, 3, 4 in the morning because it was safe. They could get off the streets. They weren't going to get murdered, weren't going to get arrested. And so they would go there for coffee. It's a sense of community. And they would actually go there to check up on each other to be like, okay, was anybody in the community murdered today? Were they raped? It was pretty rough life. And so that's where they would go. And then it even got to the point where there was a neighborhood church that was trying to, do some things for LGBT rights, and they started going there. And so Compton's kind of was like, we don't want this anymore. Like, you're running away good business. We can get raided for having cross-dressers in here. We can get shut down permanently. And so they were like, we don't want this anymore. So they would actually charge a service fee to transgender or cross-dressers, and they would call the police to have them they'd say, bunch of drag queens in here, get them out. And the police would come and harass them, be like, pay us off or you're going to jail. And, a lot of times when they went to jail, they had humiliating inspections. They would shave their head to be mean, whatever. So on July 18th of 1966, which was 3 years before Stonewall, the drag queen and transgender prostitutes picketed. And so, but it wasn't a very successful picket.
Picketed Comptons.
Picketed Comptons. And so nobody really paid attention. They didn't lose any gay business. They didn't lose any straight business, kind of fell by the wayside. So we're going to talk in, some future episodes about why this planted the seed for future episodes or future events in San Francisco that really had a bigger impact on the movement for LGBT rights. But it was historic in its own right, in that this was the first public protest by transgender and people and drag queens in San Francisco. But it's also one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this topic was it is kind of personal to me because, this was the 60s. And I mean, I do feel like very bad for these people. They had nowhere to go and all they wanted to do was have a cup of coffee. But it's interesting because, Compton's thing was I can get permanently shut down. I don't want the cops focusing on me, which it wasn't right, but also you could see their point in a way. And so it's interesting how 50 some years later, like in small town Montana, the same thing went on. So for example, I was like a waiter in college, and one of the restaurants that I worked, there was this dishwasher. He was like super hardworking, super nice. Everybody loved him. The employees loved him. The customers loved him. He was probably like in his late 30s, and he basically got caught sleeping with a guy. And so, of course, the entire town knows it. As soon as he gets caught, he's like, hey, I got to have a couple days off work. And looking back, I don't even know that he even asked for his job back. I think it was an unwritten rule that I'm gay. I'll not keep my job. And I remember somebody asking, like, is Ron going to come back to work? And the boss is like, no, we can't have that here. And then I also remember at this different restaurant I worked, it was a diner type. This guy was from Butte, moved away, and so he and his boyfriend moved back to town, and they moved from like Oklahoma or something. So this boyfriend moved clear across the country for this guy, so obviously somewhat of a commitment, And we were looking they would come in and eat all the time, have coffee, and we were looking for wait staff. And he goes, oh my God, I wait tables. He goes, I'd love to work here. You guys are awesome. You're like fun, blah, blah. And so it was almost unanimous. Everyone's like, we cannot hire him because if we do, there's going to be nothing but gay people that come in here.
Heaven forbid.
What's that?
Well, how many are there in Butte?
Heaven forbid.
Not many, but it's like they were right in that if your friend, because 4 or 5 gay guys going out in the city of Butte.
It's a gay bar.
Well, and there's not a
orgy.
small chance that you're going to get beat up, right? I mean,
Right,
there's a pretty
sure.
decent, and so if you know somebody that works there, you're going to like feel a little more comfortable. And so they weren't wrong. And I thought it is true. If they hire this guy, a lot of gays will start coming here, and it's redneck, and people are going to like, fuck, all the fags are go there. I'm not going to go there. And so it's kind of interesting how.
Do you think though that would have been
That's
that would
what
have
they would've
been? Do you think that? That's the word they use. Like, do you think though that would have been? So were they using it? What was their excuse for not wanting to hire? Like, was it because they were gonna have less business, or was it because they were scared? Or they were saying.
I think probably both. I think like
kids are gonna get
some of these
beaten up.
people probably, and it's weird because they, like a lot of them loved when they came in and they were super fun, but it's
And
like
they actually tipped probably.
probably yeah, and they treated you
More than the
nicely
tip,
and
probably.
stuff, and so
It wasn't just the tip.
I
Never
think they
is.
were like, no, if you hire him, all of his gay friends are going to come in here, and then there's going to be other people that are like, I don't want to go in there. And I mean, are they going to lose that much business? Probably not. But it's just that's the attitude in the culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just kind of interesting how, a lot of times we talk about we make all this progress, but some things stay the same. And it just kind of resonated with me, like researching this, that, wow, decades later still occurs.
Yeah, I mean, I think, money talks, right? I mean, and that's why I think with, the talk again about transgendered rights, it's like, that's not, it's not impacting a visible contingent of the community. So folks are like, well, I mean, do we really have to change? And unless you've got the rest of the LGBT community. No, see, I'm a full convert now. Unless you've got the rest of the LGBT community fighting for them, like,
well, and I do feel like
they're voiceless.
One thing that I always think of is because like you were saying, some people in the gay community, they don't like femmes, they don't like transgender people, whatever. But I mean, who were the first people in the Stonewall Inn to start beating the cops? The drag queens with their high heels, And here, it was like the transgenders that were one of the first people to stand up to the cops in San Francisco. And so, I do feel we owe a lot of where we are today to these people. People like, especially like you get on apps or dating sites like, I don't want any femmes or whatever. It's like, well, you have some of the rights you do because of the femmes,
And it's all cyclical too.
It is, yeah.
Because I was thinking, there's Hamburger Mary's, which is like a chain of drag queen entertained restaurants, and you can't go now without having a reservation because it's all straight women. And I don't think that's so much 2019, which it has some to do with it. But in the 20s, even what was considered liberal open 20s, they had what was called the pansy craze, to where they had nightclubs where drag queens would perform, and a lot of times it's men acting. They might be in a tux, but they're acting as women. Very rarely was it someone dressing as a drag queen, but at the time they were considered drag queens, and it was like the popular, trendy thing to do was go watch these drag queens perform, and some of them were very famous. Of course, they couldn't be out of the closet; they had to give like double entendres and all that kind of stuff, but. That's in the 20s, and then we go back several decades. I'd say starting in the 30s, and it's like that way for many, 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 many years.
Yeah, and like when we talked about Buchanan being gay, it was just accepted. It's like, that was what, the 1850s or whatever, and it didn't, like, they might have made a little bit of fun of him, but they were like, it doesn't affect his ability to do his job. So he and his boyfriend, and they had amazing careers. One was president, one was vice president, and so
and they were both first ladies,
right?
Yeah, they were. Speaking of ladies, there was a lady in the house. Okay, she wasn't a lady, but Barney Frank.
Are y'all familiar with Barney Frank?
Yes,
We're switching gears
Love Barney Frank.
I do too.
Hilarious. I wish he were still in the house. He was the first person to be out of the closet while they were in the Congress, which we'll save that for a different topic, because I can go on about Barney Frank for hours.
Another old man. He
was like, exactly.
I know.
He's no
like,
Bernie,
keep it in
but
your pants.
It's a spank bank.
Do you like anybody under 70?
Barney is like pre-Bernie.
Barney's
No, that's why we get
pre-Bernie.
along. So what happened on July 19th, 1990, is the House of Representatives Ethics Committee voted to reprimand Representative Barney Frank for his involvement with a male prostitute. So, before there was Grindr, there were classified ads. So you would go to like the back of gay magazines. I mean, obviously there was cruising in the park, but if you wanted to be a little more classy about it, you went to the classified ads and, would read these anonymous ads to get your booty. So on April Fool's Day of 1985, Barney Frank answered a classified ad in the Washington Blade, which is a gay publication in Washington, D.C. The ad said, quote, exceptionally good-looking, personable, muscular athlete is available. Hot bottom plus large endowment equals a good time. This is in 1985.
Wait, they were looking for a hot bottom?
This is Barney Frank reading the classified ad.
The ad said hot bottom plus well endowed. What did it say?
Well endowed.
Yeah, equals a good time.
Exceptionally good-looking, personable, muscular athlete is available. Hot bottom plus large endowment equals a good time.
No,
It's
I
anything
guess
you
I'm
want.
wondering, like, were they looking for a hot, like, was the muscular...
No, I think
athlete-
he's saying I have a hot bottom and I'm well endowed. Whatever you want.
Yeah,
Okay.
he was
You got it.
advertising his own
Okay.
body.
Gotcha. Oh,
And he wound up being a prostitute. And I don't know if the time, I think it was understood. It's kind of like how they used to have the massage, and they still do in the massage ads of like, I'll come over and massage your body, and the picture is like this guy in a Speedo, all muscled up, and it's you're supposedly paying for a massage, but
Tony, you wouldn't have known, but Kendall, did you remember those? Because you didn't watch TV, Tony, but like the 1-900 personal connection commercials, like, hey, if you want to be with and they had men and women, right? But the men, I guess the men one were trying to appeal to women, but they were trying. Sure. I mean, they were all gay men.
I have a funny story about that later.
Did you call them?
But they never actually are laying around in their lingerie.
No.
With their big hairsprayed bangs.
I have two stories about this then. 900 numbers. And they're not about me. They're about friends.
Of course they are.
Okay, back to male prostitution.
Yes, prostitution whore.
So the ad Barney Frank responded to. Now, Barney Frank had been in Congress at this point for 4 years. The guy's name was Stephen Goby, and he was a prostitute. And after they had sex a few times, they became friends. And he hired Goby with his own money and kept him at his own house, Barney Frank did, and hired him as an aide, a housekeeper, and a driver. Now, Goby was a little shady. He had already had previous...
A prostitute?
Okay.
Shady?
He wasn't one of the classy prostitutes. He already had previous felony convictions for possession of cocaine, oral sodomy, and production of obscene items involving a juvenile. So not only did Barney Frank let him live at the house and pay him, he paid his attorney fees and his court-mandated psychiatrist.
Oh.
So I need a friend like that who will pay for my attorney and psychiatrist. And
deep pockets.
So they were together for a while until the landlord came to Barney Frank and was like, your guy has people coming in and out. I think he's running a prostitution ring.
No way.
And sure enough, he was, and he admitted to it. He was a pimp and a prostitute. And Barney Frank was like, no, I had no clue. I had no idea.
I call that an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Right? Which, kind of ironically or not ironically, Barney Frank was consistent on prostitution because when he was in the Massachusetts House of Representatives in 1976, he proposed, it never even came up with a vote because it was too controversial, but he proposed for prostitution to be legal as long as it was in the red light district of Boston. It didn't go anywhere, but I mean, that was ahead of its time in 1976. So they had been living together for 2 years.
All that when he just could have found homeless men.
Well, when you're in the closet, it's easier to pay for it.
Because you expect them to be discreet if you're paying for it.
A homeless guy might go tell the press.
I mean, what's wrong with having sex with homeless men?
Nothing. I'm just saying.
Okay, thank you.
I just feel like he spent.
I mean, it was a hobby of mine in the past.
He spent
just one.
He spent a lot of money on prostitution.
What's this?
So he kicked him out in 1987. Actually, he kicked him out, and then a few months later, he actually came out of the closet, which we can also talk about in a different episode. Because he knew it was about to be leaked to the press, so he's like, I want to do this on my own. And he had a Boston Globe reporter. He said, will you ask me in an interview if I'm gay? Because otherwise it looks like I'm like, how can I say it's not a big deal that I'm gay if I come out in this big front page thing? So he was actually out a few years later in 1989 when this guy, Stephen Goby, was watching Candace Bergen in a TV movie play like a DC Madam type.
Oh, okay.
And the article I read in the Washington Post said Stephen Goby was sitting with his, and they quote, girls at his townhouse, which I thought was kind of like a sly...
Like his pimped out girls?
No, his friends.
Okay.
Like, they were making it sound like he was just kikiing with the girls, like a gay guy would do. It said Stephen Goby was sitting with his, quote, girls, unquote, at his townhome. I mean, can you just say friends?
Yeah.
But anyway, it was a subtle, like, he gay.
Yeah.
And the friends were like, according to him, that could be you. You were a DC pimp living in an expensive townhome. Why don't you sell your story? So he tried to sell his story to a news station in DC or Washington Post or Washington Times. He thought there'd be a bidding war. There wasn't a bidding war, so he was like,
They're
well,
like,
hell.
who cares?
Yeah, they were going to pay. So he was like, well, I can get a book deal out of it. So he gave it to the Washington Times for free, and they came out with the story. And Barney Frank was like, I didn't know he was a prostitute. I didn't know he was running a prostitution ring out of my home. Now, this guy was like, he knew. He said it turned him on. I mean, the guy would be like, he said Barney Frank would be like, when can I come home? Because I don't want to be caught in the same townhome with them. And then he would get home and he'd be like, tell me about it.
Oh,
He would, like, he wanted to know all. He said he was living vicariously through him. So the House, of course, was in an uproar. It wasn't Republican-led back then, but it doesn't really matter because even the Democrats would have been like, oh, my God,
you
you're
don't want
toxic.
the distraction, yeah.
I mean, I feel like, though, nowadays, you're drawing sides. Like, I don't know if there would have been the same.
Al Franken, they got rid of him. The Minnesota.
That's because Me Too had just
Yeah, but
happened.
still.
I mean, it was like a...
But if a Republican had done that, they would have not got rid of him.
I don't think ours would have done anything. I mean, I don't think they do anything now to him. But yeah, the Democrat, it's a tricky. I mean, the Dems put themselves in a tricky situation. They kind of had to do something with Al Franken. You can't pretend to go after every bad, person, and then all of a sudden your own
I think
gets
they did
called
the
out.
right thing. That's what I'm saying.
Although that's haunting Gillibrand now. But she's not.
Well, there's so much
dead.
hypocrisy. Look, Republicans are ignoring every rape charge against Donald Trump, but no Democrat is saying they believe the many, many women that accused Bill Clinton of sexual assault.
I think they are now, but yeah, at the time, 90s, it was just kind of like, oh, well, are you sure? And the Republicans are doing the
Well,
same
they are
thing.
now because they know that if I say...
But I also think, like, in the 90s, maybe a lot of it is, like, what they say to the public, right? And so regardless of what they believe personally, I think they were... they were like, I don't know, they have to have that front, I think, sometimes.
I think, too, like, for me, if I go back to why I wasn't, like, fully believing the stories of the women who accused Clinton, and maybe this is just my fuzzy memory, but I feel like most of the stories were told through the Inquirer. So they weren't, there weren't a lot, they were reported through, like, some of the national, but they weren't given the attention that the accusers of Donald Trump are. They're on ABC, NBC,
Yeah.
CNN, even Fox to a certain extent.
Well, there were tapes, though. Like, Jennifer Flowers had tapes. A lot of these women had proof. Bill Clinton would lie and deny. And then they would have some kind of proof, whether it be a dress with semen on it or tapes that obviously sound like him, that he had admitted to an affair. And, yeah, it was in the National Enquirer, but they went there with the receipts.
I know,
many
but like,
times.
when did you believe that? I mean, I just considered reading the National Enquirer like watching the Real Housewives. I mean, I didn't like, it wasn't anything that I'm like, okay, that's something, but I didn't put a lot of stock into it. But now, as those things are a bit more mainstream, I'm kind of like and those news articles and recordings have come to light more in a public forum. I'm like, oh well, shit, like, yeah, Bill Clinton was not a good person. Again,
Well,
excellent
now
law.
he's got that whole Jeffrey Epstein, who's good friends with Jeffrey Epstein, who got busted
Yep.
Right.
for underage sex with females. Although that might bring down Trump as well.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, nothing's brought down Trump yet.
Yeah.
So.
It might bring down
Exactly.
some of his supporters.
But hey, Barney Frank survived that little.
Well, Frank said, look, I didn't know anything about it. Why don't you investigate? Told the ethics committee, why don't you investigate and see if you find anything out? They couldn't come to any conclusion. And Barney Frank must have known they didn't have the goods on him. That's why he volunteered to be investigated. But they did find out that he used his influence to get 33 parking tickets fixed for the
Oh, the guy.
prostitute. Yeah, Stephen Goby. So they reprimanded him for that. And then that's truly what they were voting for when it went to the full House to reprimand him. And it passed 408 to 18.
And so what is the consequence of a reprimand? Like, you don't get...
It just goes on the record as
Okay,
we're
it's not like you
admonishing
get...
you.
Yeah.
But guess who led the whole charge against him? Who was the biggest vocal whatever against him is Larry Craig.
Oh, really?
Larry Craig,
tap
who,
your toes on the bathroom
yeah,
floor.
who
Larry
became a
Craig.
senator from Idaho and then got busted for trying to have sex with an undercover FBI agent
In
the
an
Minneapolis
airport bathroom.
He still denies being gay, but it's so obvious.
Oh, my God, yes.
You know, when I heard that, I was like, "Was that a way that you could cruise guys? I didn't know that."
I
There's a
know. I
secret
was like,
way.
what?
Like, there's a secret
I was like,
language I didn't
tap,
know.
Now
tap,
you're
tap,
tap
tap.
dancing in the bathroom every time you go in.
I know.
No one pays attention. Now everyone's tap dancing.
See, and
so-
after that, everyone was afraid to do it. So then it went like,
Thanks, Larry.
I know, we're all tapping like crazy. And then everyone's like, oh no, let's not get arrested. It's like,
And now it's 2019. No one cares. You just tap away. Well, you're tapping now on your phone. So
tap, tap, tap.
that's Barney Frank, huh?
That's it.
All
yeah.
right. Well, that's.
Oh, but you know what? It didn't ruin his career. Like, for instance, when he came out in 1987, in 1988, he won with 70% of the vote, less than a year after coming out of the closet. And then in
That was in the 80s, yeah.
And he
yeah.
was from where? Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. But 70% at that point was his highest win. And then after this whole prostitution thing came out, he won with 66%. So it really didn't. Sometimes the way you respond, I think my point is sometimes people are more ready, not always, to accept certain things than we assume.
Yeah, and I think some people, you know, they like authenticity and honesty. Because, I mean, how many of his supporters have probably been in a similar situation where they had affairs or, you know, whatever. And so you just appreciate honesty and openness. And
Also, knowing Barney Frank, he did not, oh, I'm so sorry, oh, I'm ashamed, all that kind of stuff. He said, look, investigate me. I didn't know what this guy was doing. Tell me what you found out. You know what I mean? Like, he's a super good attorney. He was always good on the Judiciary Committee hearings. But I think part of the reason was they liked the fact that he was tough back, regardless of the topic.
I feel like there's something to be said about someone who can just be like, "Hey, look." And to me, that was always my mentality. Like back in the day when I was butch and played football. Like I was always one who like, "Hey, I don't care what if you know if you're on the other side of the line and you know that what play I'm about to execute because I'm going to execute it and we're going to beat you, right? So I don't need to be scared that you know what's in my playbook. I guess is my point. And so looking at like I like the style of Barney Frank saying, go ahead, come at me because I know I got my stuff in a row and I'm gonna beat you.
yeah.
And it's not in a cocky way. It's just like try it on me, bring it. So Barney Frank. So we'll have to talk about more about Barney Frank.
I
in
think
future
there's a lot of
episodes.
stories there, yeah.
Yeah, so he was quite a character in Congress. So, all right, well, I think that was a fun little kiki, guys. So thank you for sharing all of your
Yes.
fun knowledge. And Tony, I hope you start to feel better. Well, it sounds like I know you're on the road to recovery, but I hope you don't get gangrene or something like that.
Don't
Just
put any
kidding.
ideas in my head.
And Kendall, we'll be looking forward to hearing more stories about your naps now that you're back from vacation.
Oh, I have plenty.
Oh, great.
Today I had a mid-morning nap and then a mid-afternoon nap.
What a life.
No wonder you look so good tonight.
Thank
So-
you.
Fresh,
so
I feel rested.
refreshed,
yeah.
So
yeah.
rested. All right. Well, thank you for listening to our podcast and getting to Kiki with us. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe to hear future episodes. Give us a review. We appreciate those too, wherever you're listening. You can visit our website at letstalkaboutgaystuff.com. Of course, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Let's Talk About Gay Stuff. Not only do we have fun little adverts about what we're doing, but we also have a daily post of the day in LGBT history. So if you're interested in learning more, be sure to follow us there. We're also on Twitter at Talk Gay Stuff. Also, don't forget to give a listen to our sister podcast, Our Spoopy Podcast, whose podcast is also available now. So, we're here.
We're queer.
Get used to it.